Hello, my wonderfully drowsy time travelers, my fellow lovers of slow-moving history and stories that melt your mind into dreams. Before we begin our journey to the distant past, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If these sleepy stories help you drift off, consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us create more content to lull restless minds to sleep. And if you're feeling extra cozy, leave us a comment. Tell us how long you lasted before dozing off. We love reading your experiences. Now, find your most comfortable position. Let your eyelids grow heavy and allow my voice to guide you into relaxation. Picture yourself standing at the edge of a vast, untouched wilderness. The sun is barely rising. A slow amber light spills over a dense fog that blankets the valley below. You are barefoot. The ground is cool, damp, till each step softens into ancient soil, rich with fallen leaves. There are no roads, no signs, no village to return to, only wind, trees swaying gently above you, and the distant sounds of birds you do not recognize. You are alone and hungry, not a modern hunger, not the kind fixed by opening a cupboard, but the slow ache of your body reminding you that it has been a day, maybe two, since anything solid has reached your stomach. In the Stone Age, this feeling is not rare. It's life. It is the pulse of each day. You move quietly, carefully, searching. There are no markets, no fires waiting with warm stew. There is only the land, and the land is not always kind. You reach for a berry, small, red, glistening with dew. It looks inviting, but how can you know if it will nourish you or burn you from the inside out? There are no names for these plants, no warnings carved in bark, only trial and often pain. A root buried beneath wet earth. You dig with your fingers, your nails fill with dark soil. The root is thick, knotted like an old tree branch. Its scent is sharp, almost metallic. You chew slowly. It's bitter. Your tongue recoils. Moments pass. You wait for a sign. Some plants numb the mouth. Some twist the stomach. Some simply wait in silence, then strike while you sleep. This is how food worked in the beginning. It was not a joy, not a comfort. It was a risk. Nearby, a stream flows, crystal clear at first glance. You kneel, cupping cold water into your hands. It tastes clean, refreshing, but unseen within its current. Tiny life forms drift. To us, they are bacteria, but back then, they had no name, only consequences. A day later, your belly may swell with pain, your vision blur, your body weaken. Water, dark, so simple, yet it could kill without warning. You see, the world before understanding was not silent. It whispered in patterns, in signs, but no one yet knew the language. Farther along your wandering, you come upon the remains of an animal. It's been dead for some time. Flies circle lazily, its skin open and darkened. Still, meat is meat. Your hands shake. Your hunger has grown louder than your fear. You tear off a piece. It smells strong. Rot clings to the fibers. Your mouth waters and recoils at the same time. Eating this could mean survival, or it could mean fever and death. Beneath the trees, this was the balance. Each bite, a question, and yet, somehow, people endured. Not always because they understood, but because they remembered. They watched what others ate. They learned from the sick. They whispered silent knowledge from one set of tired hands to the next. But even as they learned what was safe, the dangers didn't vanish. A soft mushroom growing on the side of a log could bring visions or stop the heart. Some plants dulled pain, others brought sleep, the kind you never wake from. They couldn't explain it, not with words like ours, not yet. So instead, they began to wonder, why did one root heal and another destroy? Why did water sometimes kill, even though it looked the same? They didn't speak of gods, not yet. There were no temples, no prayers, us all. A deep, quiet respect for the unknown. You feel that now, don't you? That sense of standing before something vast and wordless. The rustle of leaves, the scent of crushed herbs beneath your feet, the chill in the air just before nightfall. These were the early truths, the first questions, long before altars were built, before names were whispered to the sky. There was only instinct and fear and a strange, sacred silence. In the distance, a fire crackles, not yours, not yet, but someone, somewhere, has learned enough to light a flame, to warm meat, to purify water, to push back the darkness. Tomorrow, we'll sit by that fire and we'll talk softly about what these early people began to believe, not in gods or heaven or even spirits, but in science, in shapes, in dreams, and in the mysteries that hunger alone could never explain. Until then, let your thoughts float gently like ash in a quiet sky. You are safe now. There is no need to choose what to eat, no roots to chew, no streams to test, only stillness and sleep and a distant hum of the very first questions ever whispered beneath the stars. Night falls gently over the wild, not with sirens or street lamps, but with a slow silver hush. The air cools, the sounds shift, bird song fades, replaced by the distant howls of unseen animals. You are near a fire now. Its glow flickers softly against the rocks. Its warmth cradles your skin, but does not reach the silence inside you. You stare into the flames, and something deep within begins to wonder. Long before stories had names, long before prayers were carved into stone, humans still had questions, not with words, but with feelings, with trembles in the dark, with the hush of fear when thunder cracked, with the awe of a full moon lighting the night like day. They didn't ask, who made this? They felt something is watching, not a god, not yet, but a presence, a weight in the air, pattern in the stars that seemed too perfect to be chance. Imagine waking each morning to a world you did not understand. Why does the sun rise? Why do shadows stretch and shrink? Where does fire come from? And why does it die? When left alone, you might not have the words for these questions, but your heart still asks them in silence, in wonder, and slowly you begin to notice things. A certain tree bears fruit, but only after storm. A cave echoes your voice, but only if you speak softly. An animal's bones crack in a certain way and leave shapes that look like faces. You begin to see meaning in the meaningless. They didn't call it belief because belief needs language, and they barely had that. But they had symbols, they had motion, they had memory, a line scratched into stone, a handprint pressed onto a cave wall, marks made not for decoration, but maybe for remembering, or warning, or reaching toward something unseen. You touch those cave walls now, the cool rock beneath your fingers. The pigment's still faintly there after thousands of years. Red, brown, dark, black, shapes of animals, spirals, dots and lines, repeated over and over, like whispers in a language no one speaks anymore. These weren't decorations, they were signs. Not for others, but maybe for something else. Something watching in the dark. The wind howls through the trees. It doesn't sound random. It sounds like breath, like a voice too big to hear clearly. And when the lightning cracks the sky, your heart stirs, not from fear alone, but from the feeling that the world is not just matter and muscle, that behind the trees and inside the fire something waits, not a god, not yet, but something more than nothing. When someone dies, they don't just vanish. The body grows cold, still, but the eyes remain open for a moment. And in that moment, you wonder, where did they go? Their breath is gone, but the shape of them remains. And perhaps that breath, that motion, lives on somewhere. Somehow, you see their shadow in the smoke. You hear their laugh in the wind. You dream of them standing beside you, silently watching. So they began to leave things beside the dead. A stone tool, a necklace made of shells, food, dying, that, not just for memory, but for a journey to where no one knew. But the silence felt too empty without that hope, even before religions, before gods and heavens. People felt the deep ache that says, this cannot be all. This life, this hunger, this fire, surely something else waits just beyond what the eyes can see. And slowly, over thousands of nights, those nameless feelings took shape. They saw the moon and began to follow its rhythm. They saw stars and noticed how they returned each year. They sang to the fire, not to entertain, but to speak to whatever spirit lived within its glow. They danced in the dark, not for joy, but for power. To become the animal, to echo the thunder, to become one with the things they feared and needed. This was the first magic, not spells, not rituals, but reverence, a quiet surrender to a world that could not yet be explained. You feel it too, don't you? As your breathing slows, as your limbs grow heavy, that same ancient stillness, the weight of mystery pressing softly on your chest, not frightening, not loud, just present, the feeling that you are not alone, not now, oh, not ever. And so, before temples, before idols, before written words, they believed in shadows, in echoes, in the curve of the moon, and the silence of the bones, not because they were taught to, but because the world was too strange and too beautiful not to wonder. And in our next quiet chapter, we'll wander deeper into the caves, where flickers of light dance on painted walls, where the line between memory and meaning begins to blur, where the first whispers of gods might have taken root in charcoal and ochre. But for now, just rest. You've seen enough. Let the fire fade. Let your breath become slow and steady. The ancestors are silent tonight, but they're still here, in the stars, in the stone, and maybe in your dreams. The night is long, but in the ancient world, darkness is not a void. It is a canvas, a waiting place, a hushed space between moments. And in that space, the oldest beliefs began to breathe. You are walking slowly now, following the flickering glow of a small flame. The cave ahead yawns wide like a mouth. Cool air spills from it, damp and still. It smells of earth, of old stone and forgotten time. Each step you take echoes softly into the unknown, and soon you're surrounded by walls that were once alive, with stories painted in silence. The torchlight dances, and suddenly they appear. Animals, dozens of them, horses in motion, Mizon mid-charge, hands pressed onto stone, like silent signatures from the edge of memory. The colors are warm, ochre, charcoal, soft, reds, deep blacks, but there are no words, no names, no explanations, only presence. You stop, you listen. The cave seems to breathe, and you wonder, why did they come here? Why paint in places no daylight ever touched? Why walk so deep into the earth with only flickers of flame to guide them? Perhaps this was more than art, more than memory. Perhaps it was prayer, not to gods, but to the wildness itself, to the animals they followed, to the rhythms they depended on, to the mystery that surrounded them. Every waking hour, when food was scarce, they may have come here to call out in silence. When someone died, they may have lit a flame here to guide that spirit into the unknown. These walls, cool and smooth under your fingertip, may have held more than pictures. They may have held meaning, not spoken, not taught, but felt. You move deeper. The light grows dimmer, the air heavier. A hush fills the space, not fear, but reverence. You kneel before a wall. There, a figure, half human, half animal, its body long and strange, its eyes wide and watching. You feel something stir, not recognition, but something older, something buried in all of us. The image does not explain itself. It simply exists, a bridge between what is seen and what is not. Long before religions had names, there were figures like this, not gods, but symbols, messengers, shadows of the things they couldn't describe. Half beast, half person, not because they believed in monsters, but because they saw the world as connected. No border between human and animal, no strict line between life and death, only motion, only change. And through these shapes, they gave the unknown a face. They returned here again and again, adding new markings, layering pigment over pigment, generation after generation. A memory passed not in words, but in gesture, in color, in breath on stone, and maybe when they were alone in the dark, they whispered, not to themselves, but to the cave, to the spirit of the place, to the stillness that answered without sound. Outside, the world was harsh, but in here, there was quiet, the drip of water. Far away, the flicker of fire, the beat of a heart in a chest curled against the cold, and in that stillness, belief took root, not as rules, not as commandments, but as rhythm, as ritual, as wonder. This is what they believed, that some places were different, some moments were sacred, that shapes could hold power, that silence could speak, and though they had no temples, no priests, no names for their god, they still knelt, they still painted, they still paused, because they knew something lived beyond the firelight, beyond the bones, beyond the visible, As you rest here now, you understand. You may not know the names, but you feel the weight, the hush, the reverence. The cave is not empty. It holds echoes, not voices, but feelings, thousands of years old and still lingering. And as you close your eyes, those echoes wrap around you. They do not ask for belief. They do not demand understanding. They simply remind you that long before gods, long before words, there was all, and sometimes painting on a cave wall was all that was needed to make meaning out of mystery. In the next part of our quiet journey, we'll step out of the cave and into the wide, open world once more. We'll see how the earliest beliefs began to follow the sky, how the sun, the moon, and the stars became more than light. They became signs, cycles, maybe even the first sacred timekeepers. But for now, let the cave hold your thoughts. Let the cool stone anchor you to dreams. Let your breath slow, and let sleep take you just as it took them, gently, quietly, under the watchful gaze of ancient shadows. The cave has faded behind you now, its cool breath replaced by the warmth of morning. The sun is rising slowly, spilling gold across the land. Birdsong returns. The ground beneath your feet is softer here, dappled with shadow and light, and once again you are surrounded by a world without answers, but not without signs. The sky has always been there, watching, changing, and even before language, people looked up and wondered. The sun, a glowing eye that never blinked. It's he, a gift, but also a warning. Too little, and the world turned cold. Too much, and crops withered, water dried, bodies weakened. They noticed, they watched the way shadows moved across the earth. How daylight stretched and shrank with the seasons, and though they had no calendars, they counted with stones, with notches on bones, with memory passed from elder to child, like soft embers kept alive from fire to fire. At night, the stars emerged, not randomly, not like noise, but in patterns, gentle, predictable patterns, some shaped like animals, some like rivers, some simply scattered, but always returning, again and again, in their slow, endless rhythm. This rhythm became sacred, not with songs, not with names, not yet, but with awe. 'Cause in a world full of chaos and hunger and fear, the stars never lie. They came back, always, exactly when they were supposed to. And in that returning, people began to believe, not in gods, but in order, in meaning. The moon, too, played its part. It rose and fell like breath, sometimes full, sometimes gone, a quiet cycle, etched across the sky for all to see and none to control. They tracked it, perhaps with stones arranged in circles, perhaps with lines carved into wood, perhaps only with their minds. But they noticed, and they remembered. When the moon was full, the tides changed. The animals behaved differently. Sometimes, so did people. They did not explain this. They felt it. And so the moon became more than a light. It became a signal, a presence, a quiet watcher in the sky. You stand now on a high hill. The wind brushes through the tall grass, and above you, the sky opens wide, blue and endless. You close your eyes, and you begin to understand what they might have felt. Not belief in a being, but a feeling of being watched. Not in fear, but in connection, that the sky was not separate from the earth, and the earth was not separate from the body, and the body was not separate from the mystery. The seasons, too, spoke softly. Spring brought growth, summer brought heat, autumn a quiet dying, and winter the long white silence. This rhythm shaped them, made them move, made them wait, made them hope. When to gather, when to plant, when to hunt, when to rest, all of it guided by the turning of the world and the quiet dance of sun and moon and stars. They didn't say, the sun is a god. Not yet, but they may have thought, it is alive, or it knows something. And in time, they began to face it when they buried the dead. They arranged stones to follow its rise and fall. They built circles, mounds, markers, not to control the sky, but to honor it, to remember its rhythm, to stay close to whatever knowledge it held. And maybe this was the beginning, not of religion, but of reverence, the earliest understanding that life was part of something larger, that time moved in circles, that the world above spoke to the world below as the wind softens and the light fades. You begin to feel it too, not as a thought, but as a hum somewhere beneath your ribs, a knowing that you are part of the same sky, that your breath, your sleep, your dream are held gently in the same rhythm that once cradled them. The ones who came before, who lived without names, who believed without word. In the next part of our slow journey, we'll return to the earth, to the stones, the bones, the burial grounds, and we'll look at how death itself shaped the very first stories, not of judgment, but of return, of memory, of the quiet hope that nothing is ever truly lost. But for now, rest in the sky's quiet gaze. Let the stars keep their slow, steady watch. Let the moon rise behind your eyes. And let sleep, soft and timeless, carry you into their ancient dream. The sky fades behind you now, its stars growing dim, its rhythm quieting as you descend once more, back to the earth, back to the soil and the stone and the soft resting places where stories sleep beneath the ground. There is a stillness in this place, not the stillness of emptiness, but of waiting. You are walking softly through a field marked by nothing at all. No crosses, no names, no carved stones. And yet you feel them, the presence of those who came before, their bones long folded into the earth, their tools scattered like crumbs along forgotten paths. And though their voices are gone, their choices remain in how they arranged the body, in what they left behind, in the way they turned the head toward the sun, or the stars, or the eastern light of morning. You kneel now at the edge of a shallow grave. It is not grand, no monuments here, just the shape of a life curled into its final sleep, the knees drawn in, the arms folded gently, sometimes a small offering nearby, a bead, a stone blade, a shell carried far from the sea. Why? We do not know, but perhaps they believed the journey did not end here, that the person still needed something small, something useful, for whatever came next, not out of fear, but out of care, out of the deep, aching love that follows loss. They began burying their dead long before temples, before writing, before myths took shape, because even in silence, grief speaks, even without gods. There is reverence. The body was not thrown aside. It was placed. It was honored. It was returned to the earth like something precious. You close your eyes. You try to feel what they felt. Perhaps they believe the spirit stayed for a time, hovering just beyond the smoke of the fire. Perhaps they whispered to it in dreams, or laid their hands on the soil and hoped the warmth would reach through. They didn't build tombs, not yet, but they built memory in every careful placement, in every item left behind. It was not for show. It was not for power. It was for meaning, for continuity, for saying you mattered. You were here, and now you rest. Sometimes red ochre was poured over the body, a deep, rusty pigment, the color of blood, of earth, of something living and lost at once. Why? We can only guess. But maybe it was a symbol. Maybe it meant life continued. Maybe it marked a return, not just to the dirt, but to the mystery. Some graves were alone, others grouped. Families perhaps, or tribes, a quiet testimony to the truth that death was not the end of belonging. They died, but they remain part of something, and in that belief they began to build the very first echoes of eternity. You wander through this resting place, and though no voice speaks, you feel a softness in the air, as if each buried form still hums faintly beneath layers of dust and time. They believed in something more, not a heaven, not a judgment, but a cycle, attenuation, a return. Death was not a wall, it was a doorway, a passage into the unknown, and the care they gave their dead tells us something powerful. They hoped the person lived on somewhere, somehow, maybe as a bird, or a shadow, or a breath in the wind that touched the faces of the living. Their grief, not a question, it was a statement that love mattered, that life mattered, that even in a world without gods, the soul was not forgotten. And now, as your breathing softens and your body grows still, you can feel it too, that thread connecting all things, the life, the death, the care in between, the silent hands that once buried the ones they loved are not so different from the ones that tuck you into rest now. In the next chapter of our quiet journey, we'll begin to trace the steps from reverence to myth. We'll listen as the first stories take shape, how stars turned into ancestors, how thunder grew a voice, how mystery became myth. But for now, close your eyes. Let the hush of the ancient earth wrap around you like a soft blanket. You are safe, you are held, and you are part of a story that has never stopped being told. Look, the grave is behind you now. The earth once again whole. The silence of death softly fades into the whispers of memory. You walk slowly. The path is not straight. It winds through tall grass and low trees and stones worn smooth by time. And as you walk, the air begins to shift. Something is different, not in the wind, not in the ground, but in the thoughts that drift gently into your quiet mind. You see, when people began to wonder, they didn't always stay silent. They began to speak, not facts, not answers, but stories, not with books or scrolls or anything written, but with voice and firelight and breath. A shadow on the wall became the shape of something ancient. A crack of thunder became the anger of the sky. A strange dream became a message from something beyond waking. These stories didn't need proof. They weren't designed to teach. They were meant to hold meaning, to offer comfort where there was confusion, to give shape to fear, and to carve patterns into chaos. You sit now by a small fire, its flames soft, its warmth familiar around you. Shapes move, others like you, quiet, listening, half dreaming, and an elder speaks, not loudly, not quickly, but slowly, gently, like water shaping stone. They tell of the sky as a great canopy, woven by a giant bird. They speak of the river as the path where spirits travel, carrying messages from one life to the next. They speak of a time when animals could talk, when trees remembered names, and when stars were the eyes of those who never truly left. You do not interrupt, you do not question, because it is not the truth that matters. It is the feeling, the rhythm, the comfort of giving shape to the unknown. This was the earliest form of belief, not dogma, not doctrine, but story passed from voice to ear for thousands of years. A web of shared images woven across firelit nights, each listener adding a breath of their own. Stories were not owned, they were remembered, and in remembering, people felt less alone. They told of mountains where thunder lived, of caves where dreams began, of animals that guided the lost through darkness, and sometimes they spoke of things they had never seen, places they had never walked, but felt in visions, in silence, in the spaces between words. These were not yet gods, but they were becomings of belief, ideas gathering shape, not to be worshipped, but to be understood. This is how mystery became story, and story became the first sacred thing. And still, the world answered back. The sky shifted, the winds returned, the sun set and rose again, and the stories grew, more vivid, more layered. They began to explain things, why fire burned, why rain came, why people died, and dreams came back each night to visit the living, and in time, some stories stayed. They were told again and again until they became more than stories. They became beliefs, not just of one night, but of generations, passed not just in words, but in ritual, in gesture, in sacred silence. They became memory, made visible. You feel that memory now. You feel it eat in your bones, as if some part of you remembers those stories, even without hearing the words, because deep inside all of us is the longing to understand, to connect, to explain what cannot be explained, to place one quiet thread into the great woven mystery of being. And in the next part of our slow journey, we'll begin to see how stories turned into symbols, how a shape carved in stone meant more than words ever could, how the first sacred marks became bridges between worlds, between life and whatever waits depths beyond it. But for now, let the story drift away. Let the fire dim. Let your breath match the rhythm of a time before time. No need to understand. No need to hold on. Just float gently on the hush of ancient stories carried by wind and whispered into dreams. The story has faded now. The last words have drifted into the dark, but something lingers. Not the tale itself, but the feeling it left behind. A hush, a weight, a stillness that settles over the land like morning dew. You rise slowly. The fire behind you crackles faintly, then falls silent. A hit. The world is waking. You walk through mist. It clings to your arms. Soft, cool, almost like breath. And through the veil of tree, you begin to see shapes. Not natural, not random. Stone rising from the ground, like memories that refuse to stay buried. Some are tall, some are small, some lean, tilted by time, but all of them are placed not by accident, but by intention, by hands that believed this spot meant something. These were the first sacred places. No roofs, no walls, no doors, just earth and sky and stone arranged in quiet reverence. We don't know what they said here, or if they said anything at all, but the shapes speak softly, simply through shadows and silence. And we listen. You step into the circle. The ground beneath your feet feels different somehow, still held. And as you look up, you notice the stones are not random. They follow the sun, the moon, the turning of the year. Etch the light just right on certain days, the longest, the shortest, the moments between. Why? Not to measure time as we know it now, but to witness it, to stand inside its rhythm, to feel the breath of the sky as it moved through seasons and shadows. This was not worship, not yet, not in the way temples came later. This was presence, a way of standing within the mystery, of saying, here, now, no, this matters. The light, the air, the moment. Perhaps they came here to mourn, or to celebrate, or simply to wait, to feel the turning, to sense the shift. That Cavemen, not with thunder, but with stillness. Maybe a child was born, maybe a hunter returned, maybe a moon was full for the first time in weeks, and they came here not to ask, but to remember that they were part of something vast. Some of the stones carry carvings, spirals, lines, circles within circles. What did they mean? We cannot know, but the spiral, it repeats in nature, in the shell, in the wind, in the stars, is the shape of something that moves without end, and perhaps in carving it, they whispered, life returns. Nothing is lost. We are inside the motion. Others carved animals, deer, dot, birds, shapes half seen, half remembered. Were they guardians, guides, echoes of a dream, passed from fire to fire? Cannot be certain, but the carvings are there, stone holding thought, and meeting rock in a moment that still speaks, and sometimes there is no carving at all, just a single stone standing, watching, a marker, not of territory, but of meaning, a place where someone once stood and felt something worth remembering. You place your hand on one of the stones. It is rough, cool, dull, alive in its own quiet way, and for a moment you feel the ones who came before, not as ghosts, not as gods, but as breaths, as echoes, as hands, just like yours. They did not build cathedrals. They built memory in circles of earth, in rows of stone, in alignments that watched the stars. This was how sacredness began, not through fear, not through control, but through wonder, through pattern, through the desire to mark the invisible with something you could touch. And so, belief slowly shifted from cave walls to open sky, from whispers in dreams to stones that held their place for thousands of years. And in doing so, belief became something you could return to, something you could stand inside, something you could feel beneath your feet. In the next part of our quiet path, we'll begin to see how these feelings took on names, how spirits turned to gods, how nature grew faces, how belief became story, and story became structure. But not yet. For now, stay here in this circle of stone, in the hush between dawns, in the first sacred place, built not by kings, but by wonder. Let it hold you, let it quiet you, let it cradle your dreams. You are still standing in the circle of stone, but the light has changed. It is softer now, bluer, cooler, as if evening has returned. Without sound, the air feels heavier, but not in a troubling way. It feels full, like a hush before something sacred, and all around you, the world begins to whisper. The wind moves through the grass like a voice. The leaves above rustle in slow rhythm. The trees creak, not randomly, but as if they are speaking in a language older than memory. You listen, you feel, And slowly you begin to understand how it happened, how the nameless began to take on shape, how mystery grew a face. It didn't begin with gods, not with names carved in stone, not with temples or rules. It began with nature, with wind, with fire, with water and trees and stars, the forces that gave life and took it, the ones that could not be touched but always be felt. And slowly, people began to imagine, what if the wind had a spirit? What if the river had a voice? What if the sun was more than sky? What if it saw me? What if it knew? They didn't do this out of fear. Not at first. It was reverence, connection. The world was alive, not just with animals and people, but with presence. A presence in every hill, every cave, every stone that stood too still for too long. A single tree, older than any living memory, might have become a spirit in their eyes, not because it moved, but because it stayed, because it had weathered storms and droughts, watched births and burials, and never once fell. That tree was more than wood. It was wisdom, a watcher, maybe even a guardian. And then came the fires, unpredictable, hungry, beautiful. Fire brought warmth, but it also brought loss. It danced, it hissed, it consumed without hesitation. And so, perhaps it was alive. Perhaps it had mood, and will, and voice. Not God, not yet, but something more than ordinary. Something with intention. The sea, if they knew it, would have been the same. Endless, shifting. It gave food, but also swallowed whole those who stepped too far. How could such a thing not have a spirit? Something vast must surely hold, something sacred. And the sky, the ever-watching sky, day after day, it shifted and turned. It never stopped. It never rested. How could they not begin to imagine a will behind the wind? Not evil, not good, but present and powerful. So they began to speak, not just to each other, but to the world itself, to the forest before a hunt, to the river before a crossing, to the sun as it disappeared behind the hills. They offered words, gestures, small gifts, a feather, a smooth stone, a bit of food, not out of obligation, but to acknowledge, to say, I see you, I feel you, please see me too. This is where gods begin, not as rulers, not as judges, but as faces we gave to the forces we did not understand, so we could speak to them, so we could remember them, so we could feel less alone in a world full of wonder. The rain became a spirit, the mountain a watcher, we, the moon, a quiet, ever-returning companion, who listened when no one else did, and over time, these spirits began to carry names, not yet the grand myths of later times, not yet the pantheons, but seeds, roots, whispers, the very first language of belief. And once nature grew a face, people could turn to it in joy and in sorrow. They could ask for help when the harvest was thin. They could offer thanks when a child was born. They could sing to the stars, not just for light, but for meaning. And now, as the breeze brushes past your skin, as the sky fades to violet, you feel it too. That hum, that presence, not a god, not a figure, just a quiet knowing that you are surrounded by something vast, and it is not blind, and it is not cruel. It simply is, and you are part of it. In our next slow chapter, we will sit by the fire again, and we will listen as these spirits take form, as names begin to rise, as symbols turn into stories, and as the old, unseen forces become the first gods of the early human heart. But for now, let nature hold you. Let the wind pass over your shoulders like a mother's hand, and let the trees stand watch in soft silence. Let the earth cradle you with the weight of ages. Close your eyes and feel the world breathe with you. Night has fully arrived now, deep and quiet. The stars blink slowly overhead, not hurried, not watching, just being. And somewhere below them, you sit again by a fire, its warmth soft against your palms, its glow flickering along the edges of thought. You breathe deeply, and you remember everything that came before. The stones, the stories, the faces in nature, the whisper of meaning that floated between trees and rivers and dreams. But tonight, those whispers begin to gather, to take shape, to step into form. The first gods didn't come from above, not yet. They rose from the earth, from the soil, from the wind, from the everyday. They were not kings. They did not wear crowns. They did not sit on golden thrones. They were the sun that watched your birth, the rain that saved your harvest, the fire that turned night into safety, and they were the hunger that came when food did not, the silence after death, the shadow on the horizon that never explained itself. You see, gods began as reflections, not of perfection, but of experience, of the joys and terrors that filled the lives of the very first humans. They were not all powerful. They were not always kind, but they were present, felt, and sometimes feared. A mother may have whispered, to the spirit of the field as she planted seeds. A hunter may have knelt before the bones of a fallen animal, offering thanks to whatever force had allowed the chase to end. These were not rituals of worship as we know them now. They were rituals of respect, of awe, a way to speak to the invisible, to make sense of the uncertain. And so the gods began to appear, not all at once, not with rules or temples, but slowly, from story, dialect, from memory, from pattern, a god of fire, not because fire was holy, but because it was alive. It moved, it consumed, it danced, and destroyed, and protected, a god of water, not because it was beautiful, but because it gave light and took it with equal ease, a god of the hunt, of fertility, of death, of birth. These were not metaphors, not yet. They were real as wind, as real as thunder, and often they wore the shapes of things already known, a bird's wings for a sky god, a lion's strength for a god of protection, a snake's coil for rebirth, or danger, or both. These were not just symbols, they were bridges between the seen and the unseen. Some gods were feared because the forces they reflected were feared. A storm that tore the sky, a sickness without cure, a fire that would not stop. These gods weren't evil, they were powerful, and power demands care. So people told stories to explain them, to calm them, to understand them, just enough to live beside them. But not all gods were wild. Some were gentle, protective, soft like the morning mist, a goddess of the hearth, a spirit of the moon, a being of quiet places where children were born and elders went to rest. These beings weren't distant, they were near. They lived beside you, in the flicker of a flame, in the warmth of bread, in the touch of rain on your face after a long drought. And always the gods changed. They were not fixed, not finished. They grew with each telling, each prayer, each dream, passed from mother to child, from elder to fire, from tribe to wind. You open your eyes to the night sky again, and you begin to understand. The gods of old were not about answers. They were about relationship, about rhythm, about living with the unknown rather than hiding from it. They had no holy books, only stories, no commandments, only patterns, no punishment, only consequence. They lived in the seasons, in the stars, in the cycle of life, never asked for worship, only awareness. You'll lie back now, gazing upward, the stars above, still unchanged, and yet so full of meaning, Perhaps someone long ago saw the same stars and gave them names, not just for navigation, but for memory. A god who hunted the sky, a goddess who bathed in starlight, a spirit who returned each winter to remind you the light would come back. And in the next part of our soft journey, we'll follow the stars. We'll listen as myth begins to rise, as gods take clearer form, as stories stretch across the sky and down into the roots of the earth. But for now, stay here, close to the fire, close to the earth. Let the first gods, those without thrones, watch over your dreams. They do not ask for prayer, only that you notice and rest. The night remains still, unmoving, wrapped in that soft hush where time no longer matters. The fire beside you has grown quiet, its glow, dim but warm, flickers gently against the stone, against your skin. The stars begin to gather meaning, not just points of light now, not just markers of direction, but stories, figures, movements, echoes. Once, when the world felt closer to the edge of mystery, humans looked up, and they did not see emptiness. They saw patterns, forms, familiar shapes, woven gently into the dark. A hunter chasing prey, a woman pouring water from the heavens, a serpent coiled across the sky, not invented, but discovered, as if the sky itself had been waiting to be read. These constellations were more than stars. They were maps, they were calendars, they were ancestors, watching from above, and slowly they became myths, not bedtime tales, not fictions, but sacred stories, told not for entertainment, but for memory, for connection, for survival. The hunter in the sky, he returned every winter, and with him came cold winds, and the turning of the earth. The people remembered. They watched his rise, and they prepared, because myth was not just a story. It was a clock written in stars. There was a goddess too, her face hidden in the curve of the moon. She changed each night. She grew. She faded. She disappeared and always returned. They watched her and learned that life moved in cycles, that time was soft but faithful. The myths reminded them of death, but also of return. A sun that died each night, but rose again. A tree that dropped its leaves, but bloomed each spring. A river that dried, then filled once more with rain from the mountain. The world did not end. It turned, and the myths carried this truth like lanterns in the dark. You feel this now as you gaze upward, the weight of it, the stillness, the silence between stars, that somehow speaks louder than any voice. It is not empty, it is full, and in those starlit nights, the earliest storytellers began to weave it all together. Sky, stone, day, spirit, death, return. The gods gained names. The spirits grew into being, with memories, with moods, with meaning, not just forces anymore, but faces with stories of their own. A god who stole fire, a goddess who wove the clouds, a spirit who swallowed the sun and birthed it again each dawn. Each tribe told them differently, and yet somehow they were the same, because the heart of myth was always human, rooted in fear, in wonder, in longing, in awe. The myths explained what could not be seen. They filled the empty spaces between thunder and breath. They gave comfort to a child waking in the night. They gave courage to a hunter lost in fog. They gave shape to everything that could not be held. And as those myths traveled from mouth to mouth, from fire to fire, they began to grow. Some turned into rituals, some into songs, some carved into stone, others painted on cave walls, in reds and blacks and ochres, telling stories in silence. A spiral for the sun, a hand for protection, an animal for the god who watched over the hunt. But always, always, the stars remained, high above, unreachable, but always there. They watched, they waited, turned slowly in their ancient dance. And we watched them in return. We found ourselves in their patterns, and we whispered stories into the dark, so that we would not feel so small. You close your eyes now, and the stars are still there, even behind your lids, even inside your sleep, because myths do not need eyes. They live in the breath, in the bones, in the quiet rhythm of a world that still moves, like it always has. In the next part of our slow journey, we'll look down from the stars, back to the earth, to the places where humans began to build their myths into structures, where they carved belief into stone, where gods gained temples, where rituals became memory, made solid, but not yet. For now, stay with the sky, let the stars hold you, let the myths settle like dust across your thoughts, and let sleep come as softly as a story told under ancient stars. The stars begin to fade, not suddenly, not all at once, but gently, like whispers leaving a room. The sky softens, a faint line of pale gray gathers at the edge of the world, not light yet, just the promise of it. And as dawn begins its slow return, you too return from the sky to the ground, from the drifting myths above to the solid earth beneath your feet. The fire behind you has gone cold, but its memory remains. In the scent of smoke, in the warmth, still clinging to the stones, you rise and walk again, barefoot, slow, each step pressing gently into soil that has carried millions of lives before you. And ahead, rising from the mist, you see them, stone, massive, heavy with silence, but not natural, not scattered, not random. They were placed, shaped, arranged. These are not the stones of fire circles, or the quiet tombs of early burials. These are different. You stand before them now, and you feel it, the weight, the reverence, the meaning. They are not buildings, not yet. They have no roofs, no written signs, no images of kings or priests, but still they speak, not with words, but with form, with balance, with shadow, with light. These were the first temples, not for shelter, but for ceremony, for rhythm, for meaning. Somewhere along the long trail of memory, belief took root, not just in stories, not just in whispers, but in stone, in shape, in structure. You run your hand along the surface. It is rough, cold, but deliberate. The carvings are faint, but they are there. Not decoration, but message. Circles, ants that show, beasts, lines that follow the sun as it crosses the sky. Perhaps they mark time. Perhaps they mark stars. Perhaps they marked something we no longer remember. But they marked something. That is enough. Inside this place, there is no throne, no altar, no idol, just space and shape and silence that feels like listening. You close your eyes, and it feels like standing within a memory, older than language. Perhaps this was a place where seasons were welcomed, or spirits were honored, or ancestors remembered. Perhaps songs were sung here, low, slow, almost humming. Perhaps fire danced across these stones, while people moved in circles, mirroring the stars above. Perhaps this was where story became ritual, and ritual became belief, made physical. It is important to remember these were not monuments to power, not yet. They were not built to impress or to conquer. They were built to belong, to stand inside meaning, to enter the space where the invisible met the visible. And in these early sanctuaries, something changed. The god, the spirit, the myths, they were no longer just around people. They were with them, among them, brought into place and presence. You can feel it now, how belief slowly gathered shape, no longer just told around fires, but carved, fixed, now held, chỉ hao, tu, dao, so that the story would not be forgotten, so that even silence could remember. Somewhere nearby, you hear a slow wind. It brushes against the stones, and you think, this sound, this moment, has happened before, thousands of years ago, when someone stood right where you now stand, looking up, listening, feeling that same thread between mystery and meaning. These early temples didn't demand, they invited, not obedience, but attention, not fear, but wonder. And soon others would come, kings, priests, hierarchies. The myths would grow larger, more complex, more controlled. Temples would rise higher, laws would be written, names of gods would be spoken, with fear, with rules, with power, but not here, not yet, here. Belief is still soft, still breathing, still close to the earth, and as you step away from the stone, you carry that softness with you, a memory of a time when belief was not owned, not forced, not organized, but felt, shared, etched gently into the bones of the world. In the next quiet step of our journey, we'll walk forward into that moment when the gods gained names, when temples rose high, when belief met politics, and the sacred began to serve power, but not yet, not now. Tonight, stay close to the stones. Let their silence hold you. Let their weight comfort you. Close your eyes. Let the memory rest. You are safe. You are remembered. You are part of something older than words. You are walking again. Not quickly, not far. Just drifting. Breath by breath. Footstep by footstep. The stones behind you fade into the mist. Still there, but now part of the past. What lies ahead feels heavier, not in a cruel way, but in a way that suggests something important is coming, something that shaped the path we still walk. The sky is overcast, not dark, but closed. A thin veil of grey softens the light as if even the sun wants to watch quietly from behind a curtain. And through that stillness, you see them rising, not gently, but with purpose. Sharp edges, straight lines, towering above the land. Structures built not for belonging, but for power. Temples, the first of their kind. Here, belief has changed. It is no longer held in open fields or quiet circles. It is gathered, contained, directed. You feel it immediately. The difference. These are not places to simply witness. They are places to approach. With care, stone walls now speak. With authority, stairways rise, as if reaching toward something, and within, at the very center, a name, a god. No longer a spirit in the wind, no longer a whisper in the trees, but figure defined, imagined, described, and above all, named. This is where belief began. Religion becomes religion, where gods no longer shift with story, but stand fixed within walls, within statues, within tablets of law. The stories that once danced freely by firelight now become scripture, set, repeated, guarded, thought. The gods now have voices, but not everyone's voice. Only a few may speak for them. The chosen, the trained, powerful, and slowly belief becomes hierarchy, layered, ordered, directed from above. It begins with good intentions, a need for unity, for structure, for protection. But over time, the gods who once lived in rivers and trees begin to resemble the rulers who build their temples. They aim crowns, they issue commands, they reward, they punish, they become less like wind and more like kings. You step inside one of these temples, your breath echoes, the ceiling towers, the columns stretch like tree trunks carved by human hands. There is beauty here and awe, but also a distance. The god does not sit beside you by the fire. The god does not walk with you through the forest. The god waits here, behind stone, behind ritual, behind gates, to be spoken to through others, through systems, through ceremony. And this shift, this change, echoes across time. People begin to gather in larger numbers, not just to share food, but to share faith, to organize belief, to build city around temples, to wage wars in the name of what once was wonder. But even now, beneath the layers, the older breath remains. You feel it, even here. Carvings on the wall show spirals, still show suns and animals and stars. The new gods carry old symbols, as if part of them remembers where they came from, and not all was lost. The temples offered sanctuary, shelter, beauty, songs still rose within their walls. Children still learned the ancient tales. Offerings were still made, not from fear alone, but from hope and reverence. The gods had changed, but the longing for connection remained the same. You sit in a shadowed corner, cool stone at your back, and you listen, not to chanting, not to commands, but to silence, to your own quiet breath. to the echo of something older than the walls around you, and you wonder, did the gods ask for this? The stone, the gold, the thrones, or were they simply reflections of us, of our desire to shape the formless, to hold the divine in our hands? Outside, the clouds are breaking. A single shaft of sunlight falls across the temple floor. It touches the carving of a star, worn smooth by time and fingers, still shining, as if to say, the old stories are never truly lost, only waiting to be remembered. In the next part of our journey, we'll look more closely at what happened when gods became rulers, when belief became law, when temples became states. But for now, let the stillness remain. Let the stone hold you. Let the ancient weight of names and myths and memory soften your thoughts into sleep. You are safe. You are part of the story. The light outside is fading again. Soft shadows stretch across the temple floor. You remain seated, surrounded by stone walls that have witnessed centuries of voices and silence. This place once welcomed simple stories, songs whispered by the wind, spirals drawn in the dirt, and hands raised in quiet reverence. But now, belief wears a new face, not just feeling or memory, but law, law carved deep into tablets of stone. Rules given not by people, but by gods themselves. And these laws are strict, unyielding, owed to follow or face consequence. The gods have spoken, and their word is final. It was a turning point. Belief no longer floated. Free and gentle, like the breeze, it became weight, with a structure, a guide, and sometimes a cage. The stories that once comforted now demanded obedience, not just for survival, but for order. Kings and priests stood between the people and the gods. They interpreted the sacred laws. They enforced the rules. They judged the faithful. Belief became control. Power was woven into the fabric of faith. Yet, beneath all this formality, the ancient pulse remained. The rhythms of the seasons, the cycles of the moon, the stars still turning above it all. They whispered truths that no law could silence. People still sang songs in the fields. They still told stories by firelight, and in those quiet moments, the old wonder breathed on, soft, invisible, unbroken. You close your eyes, feeling the layers of history pressing gently against your mind, the weight of gods, the rise of kings, the laws that shaped nations, and beneath it all, the breath of something older, the first sacred spark that began it all. In the next part, we will explore how those ancient stories found new forms in art, in ritual, and in the hearts of people who sought connection beyond the laws. But for now, rest here. Let your thoughts drift like leaves on a slow river. Let sleep come. You are safe. You are remembered. You drift deeper into the past, into shadows softened by time. The stone walls behind you no longer confine, but open wide to endless skies and ancient forests. Here, belief is not just law, it is image, sound, movement. The first symbols are not words, they are shapes carved or painted, spirals and dots, lines crossing lines, hands pressed gently into soft clay or rough cave walls. Each mark holds a secret, a meaning beyond language. These signs are invitations to remember, to connect, to enter a space where time folds and stories live. They are the first prayers, spoken without sound. Rituals follow, simple, slow, often silent movements around fire, offerings left on stone altars, songs hummed to stars, never listen but always hold. You can almost hear the soft footsteps moving in circles, the quiet breaths shared beneath moonlight, hands passing gifts of feathers, stones, or the first fruits of harvest. No grand ceremonies yet, just shared moments held gently between people and the unseen. These acts are the thread that binds the past to the present. They teach patience, they teach presence, they teach how to stand inside mystery without fear. How? And as you rest in this space, you feel the connection, not just to those who lived before, but to something larger, a breath that flows through all things, the wind that moves the trees, the fire that warms your skin, the earth beneath your feet that holds every step ever taken. In the next part, we will trace how these early symbols and rituals grew into the myths and stories that shaped human hearts for millennia. But for now, let the quiet hold you. Let your mind wander like smoke rising slowly into the night. Close your eyes and sleep deeply. The night deepens, the world slows. Your breath matches the steady pulse of ancient rhythms. You are no longer just a wanderer in time. You have become a listener, a keeper of quiet tales that stretch back beyond words. Symbols, once simple and small, now begin to whisper louder. Not just marks on stone or clay, but shapes that carry life, a spiral turning inward, speaks of cycles, of birth and death, of light and shadow, of the endless turning of the world. A handprint pressed in red ochre tells a story of presence. I was here, it says. I touched this place. I belong. Animals drawn with careful strokes. The deer, the bison, the mammoth are not just beasts. They are teachers, companions, sometimes gods themselves. You can almost see the flicker of firelight playing over these images. Hear the soft murmurs of those who made them, their fingers steady, their hearts full. Each mark is a prayer, each line a song without sound. And from these images, stories begin to grow, stories that explain the wind and the rain, stories that carry the memory of hunts and harvests, of love and loss, of the mystery that surrounds all life. These early myths are not tidy tales. They do not follow rules. They do not come with neat endings. They are living things, changing with every telling, growing with every ear. A story might begin with the sun as a great hunter chasing the moon across the sky, or it might speak of a great flood that cleansed the earth, making way for new life to grow. Sometimes the stories are fierce, filled with struggle and danger. Sometimes they are gentle, soft as a mother's breath in the dark of night around crackling fires. These stories were shared not as entertainment, but as memory, as teaching, as connection. They helped people understand the world and their place within it. They gave names to fear. They gave shapes to hope. They gave voices to the silent mysteries that filled the air. You feel the weight of these stories now, not as burdens, but as gifts, a thread woven through generations. As human groups grew larger, these myths helped bind them together. Shared stories became shared identity. They were told differently from tribe to tribe, but their heart beat the same. They taught respect for nature, for each other, for the unseen forces that shape life. Rituals grew with the stories. Songs rose with the dawn. Dances spun in circles beneath open skies. Offerings were made of food, of art, of silence. The sacred was not confined to temples or stone. It was everywhere, in the river's flow, in the crackle of fire, in the breath of the wind. And you can feel it now, this ancient pulse, still living beneath your skin, the same breath that carried the first stories, the first prayers, the first dreams. But myths also hold shadows. They carry warnings and lessons in pain. They tell of loss, of death, of worlds ending and beginning again. These stories are not always easy. They do not promise peace, but they promise truth. As the fire's glow fades and your eyes grow heavy, you realize that these stories, the first myths, are not only about gods, they are about us, about our fear, our wonder, our endless search for meaning, and in that search, we find ourselves a little closer to the mystery, a little softer in the dark, a little more ready to dream. In the next part of our slow journey, we will explore how these ancient stories shaped the rituals of the early world, how dance, song, and silence became bridges between human hearts and the vast unknown. But for now, let the stories settle like dust on your mind. Let your breath slow. Let your sleep deepen. You are safe. You are remembered. You are part of the endless story. The world feels vast tonight, soft and endless, like a slow breath held gently in the darkness. You are no longer just a listener to stories. You are a part of them now, a thread woven quietly into the fabric of ancient memory. The firelight flickers low. Its glow barely touches the edges of shadow, and around it, stories unfold, not as mere tales, but as living things, moving, breathing, pulling at the edges of sleep. In the beginning, stories were the soft whispers between the earth and sky. They were not spoken with words alone. They were sung, danced, drawn in the dust, traced in the stars. Imagine the slow, rhythmic steps of a dance beneath the open sky, feet pressing into soft earth, hands raised, shaping the air, bodies moving like wind, not for spectacle, not for applause, but to touch the unseen, to reach across the veil that separates us from the mysteries we feel but not fully know. These movements were prayers, songs without sound, stories told with flesh and breath. Each gesture held meaning. Ho to the rain, a plea for a good hunt, a thanksgiving for life. The rhythm of the dance matched the rhythm of the earth, the rise and fall of the sun, the ebb and flow of the rivers, the turning of the seasons. And in this rhythm, people found connection, not just to the world around them, but to each other. Gathered in circles, the first communities share these rituals, their voices low, their movements slow and deliberate. The fire was the heart, its warmth a reminder of life's fragile glow. Against the vast dark, rituals grew from stories, and stories grew from rituals. They fed each other like roots beneath the soil, invisible but vital. Through ritual, the stories gained shape. Through stories, the rituals found meaning. Offerings were placed gently on the earth. A handful of seeds, haunted stone, a feather carried from afar. These gifts were not about wealth, not about power, but about presence. A way to say, I see you, I honor you, We walk this path together. No. And the earth listened, the sky watched, the wind carried prayers to places unseen, and in return, the world responded. Rain would fall after a dance, the hunt would be fruitful after a song. Life would continue, held tenderly between human hands and the forces beyond. You can feel it now, the sacred in the everyday, the way breath becomes prayer, the way movement becomes meaning, the way stories and rituals are not separate things, two sides of the same slow unfolding. But this was not always peaceful. Rituals also held tension, fear, uncertainty. They were a way to face the unknown and make it known, to hold what cannot be held, to give form to the formless. And so, the dances sometimes quickened, the songs sometimes grew loud, the offerings became more deliberate, not out of showmanship, but out of a deep need to influence the unseen forces that ruled life and death. The first shamans, the ones who could speak to the spirits, led these rituals. Their voices were low and steady, their movements sure. They carried the stories and the power to guide their people through the shadows. They were bridges between worlds, between the seen and the unseen, between life and death, between the earth below and the sky above. If you close your eyes and feel the slow pulse of those ancient rhythms, the footsteps circling fires, the murmured songs beneath stars, the gentle, steady heartbeat of a world alive with meaning. In time, these rituals grew more complex. Temples rose from the ground, voices grew louder, and gods gained faces and names. But in this moment, under the quiet night sky, you return to the beginning, to the soft dance between earth and sky, to the stories told without words, to the prayers breathed into the wind. In the next part of our slow journey, we will explore how these early rituals and stories evolved into the myths that shaped entire civilizations, how the dance became drama, how the quiet songs became sacred chants. But for now, let the soft rhythm of the ancient world carry you gently into sleep. You are part of the story. You are part of the dance. You are safe. You are remembered. The night is deep and still. Soft shadows rest like blankets, folded gently over the land. The world breathes slowly, as if waiting patiently for the next story to unfold. You are here in the quiet space between dreams, where history flows like a gentle river, soft and sure. Ritual and story, they move together like twin rivers weaving through the same valley. One flows with movement and sound. The other flows with image and meaning. Over time, they begin to merge, and from that union, something new is born. Imagine a group gathered in the dusk, the firelight painting faces with warmth and shadow. The dancers move slowly, their steps deliberate and measured. The singers hum low, their voices carrying ancient melodies. And in the midst of all this, someone begins to speak, not just a word here or there, but a story that carries the rhythm of the dance, the cadence of the song, a story that weaves the images drawn on cave walls with the movements of the body and the breath of the song, a story that brings the unseen spirit into the firelight's glow, that gives shape to the formless and voice to the silent. This is the birth of mythic drama, a slow unfolding of story told not just by word, but by gesture, sound, and light. These early performances were not about entertainment. They were about connection, a bridge between the human and the divine, a way to bring the mysteries of the world closer, to make them felt deep in the bones. The stories told here were not fixed in stone. They changed with each telling, a new meaning found in every breath, a new life breathed into every word. You can imagine the flicker of firelight, casting shapes across faces, the rise and fall of voices, carrying through the night air, the weight of silence between each word, the collective breath held and released with every pause. And through this living story, people learned. They learned about the sun and the moon and the stars. They learned about the animals they hunted, the plants they gathered, and the spirits that moved unseen among the trees and rivers. These stories held the truths that could not be explained by sight alone. They taught about life and death and what might lie beyond. They offered comfort in the face of the unknown, and slowly these stories began to shape the way people saw the world. They gave order to the chaos. They named the forces that moved the earth and sky. They created a tapestry woven from fear, wonder, and hope. You feel the power of these early myths now, like a soft current beneath your skin, not overwhelming, but steady, a quiet reminder that even in the darkest night, there is meaning. And as these stories grew, they inspired rituals, ceremonies to honor the sun's return, to mark the changing seasons, to seek favor from the spirits. Songs rose higher, dances grew more intricate, and the rhythm of the earth was echoed in every step. This was not just storytelling, it was living, a world where myth and ritual were inseparable, where the dance told the story, and the story became the dance. In these moments, you can sense the first flickers of what would become religion, not yet formalized, not yet fixed in law, but alive, fluid, breathing. You breathe in sync with the slow cadence of ancient drums. Your heart beats quietly with the rhythm of the dance. Your mind drifts gently through the stories carried on the night wind, and you realize these ancient ceremonies were more than belief. They were a way of being, a way to belong to each other, to the earth, to the sky. The fire burns low now, its warmth soft and steady. The stories have settled like soft dust on your thoughts, and as you close your eyes, you carry the rhythm with you, the slow dance of myth and ritual, woven quietly through time. In the next part of our journey, we will explore how these early myths and rituals became the foundation for the great religions of the world, how stories shaped empires, how rituals carved societies, and how the human search for meaning continues to this day. For now, let the slow rhythm of the ancient world carry you gently into a deep, peaceful sleep. You are part of this story. You are remembered. You are safe. The world is quiet now, soft like a breath held deep within the night. You walk slowly, not through stone or forest, but through the fading echoes of ancient footsteps. You move from the flickering firelight into the slow unfolding of time, where stories and rituals begin to shape more than hearts and mind, but entire ways of living. The myths we have carried like lanterns through the dark now grow heavy with purpose, no longer just whispers. By the fire, they become laws, codes to follow, the skeleton of societies. In this slow dawn, human groups begin to settle, no longer wandering endlessly, but planting roots deep in the earth. They build villages, then towns, then cities. Walls rise, fields spread wide, and the world changes under the hands of many. With this change comes new need, order, structure, rules to achieve, not just for survival, but for belonging, for identity, for control. The sacred stories transform alongside the stones. Gods become rulers. Rulers become gods. The fluid, shifting myths solidify into ceremony. Hierarchies, temples, priests and shamans rise, guardians of the sacred flame, interpreters of the will of gods and ancestors. They stand between the people and the invisible powers. Their voices echo through vast halls and open fields. Their rituals command, their laws govern. But even in this growing complexity, the ancient pulse remains. The rhythms of earth and sky, the cycles of moon and sun continue to mark time, binding people to a larger story. You can hear the slow hum of chants rising at dawn. Feel the steady beat of drums marking the dance. See the flicker of torches casting shadows on ancient walls. These ceremonies are both celebration and control. They bring comfort and order. They teach loyalty. They teach fear and hold communities together and set them apart. In the great temples, statues stand silent, their faces carved with care, their eyes fixed on eternity. Offerings are laid with reverence, gifts to please the gods, to ensure favor, to hold back chaos. The myths grow grander, filled with heroes and monsters, creation and destruction, love and vengeance. They explain the world, justify power, and give meaning to suffering. You sense the weight of these stories, not light tales told to pass the time, but heavy truths carved deep into the bones of civilization. And yet, beneath the stone and gold, the simple breath of the ancient world still lingers, the wind that carries a whispered prayer, the quiet dance beneath a starry sky, the slow, steady rhythm that beats in every heart. As the night deepens, you feel yourself becoming part of this vast tapestry, a single thread in the endless weave of myth, ritual, and belief. And as you settle into rest, you know this journey is far from over. There are more stories to tell, more mysteries to explore, more dreams to dream. In the next part, we will explore the origins of the gods themselves, how ancient peoples named the forces they could not see, and how those names shaped the worlds they lived in. For now, let your thoughts drift gently like leaves on a slow river. Let your breath grow soft. Let sleep find you. You are safe. You are remembered. You are part of the story